Comparing any RPG to Destiny of an Emperor is pretty difficult. While certain games like Phantasy Star share core mechanics with it, their overall gameplay is very different. This is going to be a little bit hard to get through, but we'll definitely be able to pull it off, just like we did with the other games. There are a few similarities in the gameplay, story, and quests. This isn't all that surprising, given that both of these games are turn-based RPGs. Their graphics on the world map are not too far apart, but that's kind of where things end. Then, you go to the battle scenes, the comic book cutscenes, and everything is very freaking different from there. I really like both of these games. Phantasy Star is somewhat newer to me, and it is more of a traditional RPG, while Destiny of an Emperor is a game that I've been playing for years, and, well, if you're looking for a difficult retro RPG, I would play Phantasy Star, and if you want something a bit more unique, then I would go to Destiny of an Emperor. So Phantasy Star is a science fiction RPG that has the player going on a spacefaring adventure across 3 planets. And Destiny of an Emperor takes place in ancient China and is a fictional retelling of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. It is closer to an alternate history than anything else. Basically, these two games' settings are very, very different. Both games send the player on a quest to assemble a party of characters, but one of them has hundreds of characters and several plot twists. They have very different magic systems. Destiny of an Emperor has you assemble a party of 7 characters, whereas Phantasy Star, it's only 4. Phantasy Star is a much more straightforward RPG that follows a pretty familiar pattern. You know how the game is going to end. You know right away what you have to do and who you're going to have to fight at the end of the game. There is a little twist, but for the most part, you know exactly what's going to happen or what will happen in the game. With Destiny of an Emperor, you're constantly fighting different armies. It progresses through the events of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and it takes a little bit of a liberty with the source material. You have Liu Bei being presented as the heroic savior of China, and the one who's going to unify everything. That's not what happened in history, but hey, it makes a much better story with this. Both games end the same way, and like most RPGs on the home console, you end up defeating the last big bad guy and restoring peace to the game's world. It's a happy ending for both of them. It's kind of fun the way they do it. Phantasy Star is, in my opinion, a little bit better with its ending because it throws one hidden enemy at you that you didn't necessarily know at the beginning of the game. There's just a brief overview of these two games. Let's get into some of the major differences between them. There are a lot of differences between these two games, and just for the sake of brevity, I'm going to keep it to 3: graphics, story, and then gameplay, because those are the major things that are different between these. Not all of the gameplay, but just part of it. Graphically, these games are very different. Phantasy Star has comic book cutscenes, the enemies are much larger and very well detailed. You're not fighting as many human enemies in this game, they're a bit more creative. The dungeons are in first person, and yeah, it's just overall, it's like night and day here. Destiny of an Emperor looks more like one of the Dragon Quest games. It just doesn't look anywhere near as good as what Phantasy Star looks. The stories and the setting are also very different. There are more twists and turns in Destiny of an Emperor, where you are constantly defeating one enemy general, and then another warlord will show up. Near the end of the game, or closer to about 2/3 of the way through, all of a sudden 2 of your main generals will retire, for lack of a better way to put it, and their sons will take over. That doesn't happen in Phantasy Star, because you don't really have that. Phantasy Star is a more traditional narrative structure where you gather your party members, collect key items, and eventually go on to beat up the game's big bad guy. In Phantasy Star, you only have 4 playable characters. In Destiny of an Emperor, you've got dozens, if not hundreds, of possible playable characters. You have so many options to put together your 7-man party, not to mention all of the possible tacticians that you can use. The game just throws a lot at you. There are only 6 characters that gain levels. One of them is going to end up being your tactician. So yeah, they're quite different. The magic systems are totally different. Phantasy Star is more straightforward with its magic system. You're using spells, you have magic points, that kind of thing. And you gain more spells as you go throughout the game, just simply by, gaining experience points, you're learning new spells. In Destiny of an Emperor, the player has several military tactics that are only available if you assign one of your generals to the role of a tactician. Their names have been Romanized instead of being actually translated, which means you're going to have to look up what these spells are in order to have any idea what they do. Or just try it through trial and error, and hopefully you'll figure it out. Those are the major differences between these two games. If I think of more of them, I'll probably just blurt them out during this, but we'll move on to kind of comparing the core mechanics. And again, for sake of brevity, I'll skip over some of the stuff that I've already done. In Phantasy Star and Destiny of an Emperor, the player, they still have to assemble their party, but it's a lot easier to do that in Phantasy Star, mostly because you only have 4 characters. In Destiny of an Emperor, it takes a lot longer because you'll need to get your way through, a whole bunch of just enemy warlords and whatnot. You can also recruit enemy generals to your side so you don't have to deal with them later. It's kind of a cool way of doing it. Phantasy Star is much more science fiction with a little bit of Greek mythology, and yeah, it's a very fun and unique story for a console RPG. That's something that you can also say about Destiny of an Emperor. It's kind of unique for its more historical setting and not really going into fantasy or science fiction or anything like that. I skipped over a bunch of stuff because I don't want to repeat myself in this. So let's just move on to what Phantasy Star does better. Phantasy Star does a lot of things better than Destiny of an Emperor. It has a better magic system, the graphics are better, it's got a less confusing, party system to deal with. There's a lot of other things, but I'm just going to try to focus on those few. Phantasy Star's magic system is better than Destiny of an Emperor's. It's just much easier to know what each spell does, and I like that you're not pulling from just a pool of magic points for all of your characters. You have 2 characters that can use magic. They both have their own set of MP, which just works much better in a game like this. There really isn't too much to say about the graphics. The world map and the towns, they don't look too different. The battle screens, dungeons, and enemies, they all look way better in Phantasy Star. Capcom just did not do a very good job with the way the game looks when you go into a battle, and Sega did an absolutely amazing job with Phantasy Star. The battle screens really stand out to me. Phantasy Stars look so much better than Destiny of an Emperor's. The enemies look better, they've got little combat animations, and you get more than just a boring black screen. Phantasy Star's enemies are much more creative than simply having human armies that just look like the random NPCs that you run into when you go into a town. It's nice to play something that doesn't use sprites from the world screen as its enemies. As much as I like the party system and how it's done in Destiny of an Emperor, it gets overly confusing, especially when you haven't gathered your 5 main characters just yet. So, yeah, that's kind of a knock against the game, having just hundreds of enemy generals sitting there waiting for you to not use them, and then trying to figure out which one is better. it's just kind of time consuming. I could keep going, but I don't want to make it look like I'm just bashing one game here, especially when I like both of these. Phantasy Star just does so many things better than the other RPGs that were released on the home console in the late 80s and early 90s. And yeah, it can feel a little bit like dogpiling when you go over something like this. There really isn't too much that I can point to as being better in Destiny of an Emperor. I do like that you can recruit enemy generals. I also really like this interpretation of the source material. Much of this is really going to be about just the uniqueness of this game. What Destiny of an Emperor does differently is being different from a traditional JRPG, or just a traditional RPG. That is the biggest asset that this thing brings to the table. There's really nothing quite like it on the NES. I really like that you can, defeat enemy generals in this game and then recruit them to your side so you don't have to deal with them later. It just makes fights in the future a little bit easier than they probably would have been. Aside from being different from the other games, there's not too much else that I can say that this is going to be doing better than Phantasy Star. Both games are pretty grind heavy, so I couldn't really tell which one was less grindy than the other one, for a lack of a better thing to say. There are a number of things that I like about this game, but they're all really just based on personal preference. So let's go into which one I think is better, and I don't think anyone is going to be surprised by this. Phantasy Star is better overall. It does just about everything better than Destiny of an Emperor, and if you're looking for a more traditional RPG, then this is the one that you should try out of these two. Both of these games have pretty high encounter rates, and they require the player to kind of grind for levels, but I think Phantasy Star has a little bit less of that when you compare it to Destiny of an Emperor. It's very close, though, so who really knows? Destiny of an Emperor is just a better setting, in my opinion. It's got a better story, the graphics are better, and I think the gameplay is more user-friendly than it is in Destiny of an Emperor. I know that might be a little bit hard to believe, but it is easier to manage your inventory and items in Phantasy Star than it is in Destiny of an Emperor. The story is also more straightforward in Phantasy Star. It doesn't force the player to do as much backtracking because it's not as big of a map or maps as Destiny of an Emperor is. While you do have to visit a few places several times, there are more fast travel options in Phantasy Star than there are in Destiny of an Emperor. In Destiny of an Emperor, you just have like an item that you can use to transport to different towns, and that costs money, which is kind of annoying. Also, in Destiny of an Emperor, you have to buy a whole lot of food to keep your army alive, so that's something that you don't have to do in Phantasy Star. So yeah, there's also that. Finding your party is also easier, and it takes less time in Destiny of an Emperor, and it's also better incorporated into the story. Both games have quests to find all of your party members, but it just seems like it makes more sense with Phantasy Star, even though Destiny of an Emperor does do a good job of including that all into its story. The graphics are just considerably better than Destiny of an Emperor. Phantasy Star has its comic book cutscenes, which I absolutely love. The enemies look better, and the battle scenes look way better. I could keep going, but yeah, just be saying the same things I have already said. So let's move on to which one I would rather play. I'm not sure if this is going to surprise anyone, but I would rather play Destiny of an Emperor. There's just something I find compelling about this game that doesn't really exist with other games. The game isn't like any other RPG on the NES, and I've just got a lot of fond memories of playing it. I really love the story and the setting in this game. The Three Kingdoms period of China is such a great setting for a creative work. The games that Capcom made that were based on this fictional interpretation of Romance of the Three Kingdoms are really good. I just love this whole idea of we're going to take one character and he's going to become our main hero, and we're just going to go off from that and completely mess with history. It has a lot of things that you're just never going to see in another RPG unless you go and get the sequels to this game that Capcom didn't release in the US. You end up with dozens of characters that aren't all that useful, but there is a point to it. Like, if you take them off the battlefield early, you don't need to deal with them later. That's something I kind of like. While the game has a number of issues with it, it's one of my favorite NES games. Once you learn how to play the game and how the magic system works, and thankfully you can find the manual online that explains everything, then it's really just a wonderful experience. I've got a ton of memories with this game, and yeah, it really is one of my favorite RPGs. Not just my favorite NES games, but one of my favorite RPGs overall. Writing this up was a lot harder than I was expecting. Just trying to compare anything to Destiny of an Emperor is much harder than I thought it was going to be, just because it's such a weird game when you're trying to, lay it all out with another RPG. Both of these games are a lot of fun to play, but I would rather go back and play Destiny of an Emperor because of just how weird it is, and because I like the setting of the game. Phantasy Star is great, but it isn't my favorite in that series. With the Phantasy Star series, I would rather go back and play 4 than the first one, and that's not something I can say with Destiny of an Emperor because we only got one of them in the US. So, yeah, that's gonna wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.